Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the Called2B Podcast, where we seek to empower everyday believers to discover and live out their authentic calling in Christ. I'm Reverend Dr. Travis Guzzi. I'm Executive Director of Wellness and Coaching for the Southeastern District of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. I'm also an ICS Certified Life and Executive Coach and a Gallup Strengths Coach. And it is wonderful having all of you, our listening and viewing audience, joining us for this once-a-month Everyday Believer conversation, where we have conversations with everyday believers doing extraordinary things in God's kingdom. And today we have a special guest who is joining us. His name is Kurt Senske. He is founder of CEO Board Services and also the author of a fantastic new book called The CEO and the Board. And so we're going to be talking about how he lives out his calling in Christ through this vocation of his with this company and in the book that he's writing, and what it means for you who are living out your calling if you are a leader of an organization. And so it is exciting to have Kurt with us, and I look forward to this conversation. Before we dive into our conversation with him, though, I do want to encourage you to make sure you like and subscribe. It helps with the algorithms. If you've been blessed by this, we know that others will be as well. And so don't only listen and share this, but make sure you like and subscribe. It helps get the word out about the Called2B Podcast as we seek to empower everyday believers. And with that, I'd like to introduce all of you to Kirk. Kirk, it's wonderful having you join us for this Everyday Believer conversation for the Called2B Podcast. How are you doing today?
Travis, I'm doing excellent. Thanks for having me.
Very good. Hey, Kurt, we have conversations with people like you, everyday believers, not professional church workers, but God's people who are living out their callings, their vocations in all these different ways in life. And I'm excited to talk to you about how God's working through you in your calling, especially with this company, CEO Board Services. But before we do, I'd love to have you maybe just share with our listening and viewing audience just a little bit about yourself, your life and faith journey. What's brought you up to this point?
Yeah, so what's fascinating about my journey is that I was the first person in my family who wasn't either a church worker or a farmer. And I knew I had absolutely no talents to be a farmer, right? And I did not feel that call to be a church worker. So what's the farthest away you can be from that? I became an attorney and I worked in politics.
There you go.
And, but, you know, God has a funny sense of humor because I would say for the last 30 years, I have worked in the church and within secular organizations as well. But really, he has an amazing gift for teaching us in ways you don't think about to provide you with the skill sets to live out your calling throughout your entire life.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. So, obviously, you've got a passion for talking with leaders, working with them, with boards, with organizations. Where did that passion come from for you?
Yeah. You know, I think I have an interesting perspective in that I was blessed to serve for 23 years as CEO of what was then Lutheran Social Services of the South, and now it's called Upbring. I've also served on 13 different boards of directors, a startup, a nonprofit, Lutheran Services in America, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. I was chair of Thriving Financial, a Fortune 500 company, and now as a consultant. So I've seen this perspective of governance and how it is intertwined in strategy from all three perspectives, right? As a CEO, as a board member, as well as now as a consultant.
Yeah, so you've had a lot of different perspectives from leading, working with boards, now consulting with boards. And that kind of led you to writing this book. This came out, last year, correct? The CEO and the Board?
Yeah, early this year, actually.
Early this year. Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
I've had a chance to look through it. A lot of really great wisdom that you provide in it. What was your purpose in writing this book? What did you hope that it would accomplish for those who would read it?
Yeah, I wrote most of it during and right after COVID. And I was convinced that the governance models of the days of old, for example, the Carver model, policy-based governance, while they may have made sense in the past, that in this new normal, they maybe no longer made sense for each organization. And so, you know, every organization has its own unique culture, history, operating environment, unique challenges. And the sense I had was that the governance models that were out there today just didn't necessarily have that neat fit. And so I wanted to write a book that would help boards and leadership teams create and craft their own governance model based on, what they saw in the past, based on maybe a policy-based management model or a governance model or a strategic model, but that would fit their unique organization. The other thing that I saw with this new normal is as organizations got more complex. So it could be compressed margins. It could be, if you're a congregation, individuals not coming back to church. It could be new competition. It could be the cost of a digital transformation, all sorts of pressures that every organization is facing in its own unique way. And the sense I got was that the current governance practices of most organizations just did not fit that new reality. And so that was the purpose for me writing this book.
Yeah, as you think about that, so in some ways, I'm hearing you say is kind of the boilerplate approaches of the past, or cookie cutter approaches, isn't necessarily working for this day and age that many organizations find themselves in.
Yes, exactly. And, so a couple of examples. One, in the old days, I think we relied primarily on well-meaning volunteers to populate our boards. And at the time, that basically worked. As our society and organizations and competition and the challenges get more and more complex, it's really vital, if an organization wants to continue to thrive in the long term, to really be intentional about who they want to have to sit around that board of directors. And it may be a diverse set of skill sets, experiences, life experiences. All of those will help that board become a true strategic partner to the leadership team, whether it's an executive director or a pastor or a CEO or a principal, as opposed to just in some ways being more passive and not really being that true strategic partner.
Right. So instead of just looking for warm bodies that will fill a seat, we're looking for who can help you advance your mission. What are the talents, the skill sets that you need to fill out that team so that it can operate together?
Yes. Because, historically, I think, and I was in this category at times as well, you get frustrated with your board because you don't necessarily see them as a partner. And sometimes it feels more like a hindrance that's just getting in the way of you doing good work. What I learned in my journey is that when you have that right board sitting around your table, they make you a better CEO. They make the organization, in terms of the clarity of mission, in terms of the long-term success, they become a true partner. And at the end of the day, that's what every board member wants. They want to be that true strategic partner with the leadership team because they have that passion for the organization that they're involved with.
Right. But so as you look at the landscape, you talked about the new normal. What do you feel are some of the unique challenges, whether it is a for-profit business, it's a nonprofit organization, or maybe a church ministry? What are they navigating today that they weren't before COVID and the pandemic and everything else went down?
Yeah, so I could give you a laundry list. So it would include, for example, the hybrid work relationships that didn't necessarily occur as much pre-COVID that are now almost expected today, right? The cost of digital transformation, the new competition that's occurring not only among nonprofits, but between for-profits and nonprofits, whether it's senior services or if you're running a Lutheran school and there's a charter school that opens down the street. What does that do in terms of your mission going forward? The fact that executive directors and pastors, the CEOs, they're expected to be on call almost 365 days, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're being judged on social media and, for example, websites such as Glassdoor that you get to rate how's your CEO doing today.
The really Yelp for organizations, happened. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And then we're also on the fundraising side seeing that less people are giving gifts, and the amount of gifts that they're giving is actually decreasing in size as well. And there's a sense among nonprofit leaders and foundation leaders that this isn't going to change. The middle class is feeling that inflationary pressures. There's a little bit less respect and trust for nonprofit organizations. And so it's indeed a whole new environment that a CEO is required to operate in this day and age. And none of us have all of the skill sets to do every single role.
Right.
And that's why, from my perspective, it's more important than ever today to have that group of people sitting around your board table that can be your counsel, can be your advisor, and the collective decision will most likely be better than your individual decision.
Yeah. So as you think about that, how can, and just a kind of a question, because, I've been a pastor of congregations, I've worked with nonprofit organizations, so I kind of get that dynamic of the leader and the board that they work in and a governance model. As you think about these different organizations and ministries, what is the impediment of having the wrong governance model for an organization trying to fulfill its mission?
Yes. So, to me, it doesn't matter which model they choose as long as it's right for their organization, right? So if you're talking about a congregation, it could be an operating model, which, basically means everybody's hands-on. It could be a management model, which means you have a lot of different committees. You might have, for example, a program committee and a facilities committee, or you might have a pure governance model, which a lot of the larger congregations have. But once you decide which model is right for your organization, that's the starting point, but it's never the end. The next step then is, all right, how do we tailor this model to best fit our unique situation, our unique history, our unique culture, our unique operating environment? Because every organization, every congregation is going to be different. And so you need to adjust for that. And to me, that's the fun part of governance, because it allows the leadership team and the board to use their own creativity, their emotional intelligence, to put together and to come together as a team to actually fulfill the mission of that organization. That's the fun part to me. And also then it's an understanding that for this to work, you're going to have complete trust and integrity and what I call radical transparency between the board and the leadership team. And, it's also going to take this understanding that we got to really sit down and think forward 50% of the time at least to talk about what is our clarity of mission? What do we want to accomplish in our local community for the kingdom of God? It's interesting. One example of this is, if you think about what people call the sigmoid curve. In every organization, it doesn't matter if it's a congregation or a nonprofit or a for-profit, it's kind of like a roller coaster. You go up, 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 and you're accomplishing your mission. But if you don't change the tracks while you're doing that and figure out what the new normal is based on the changes in the external environment, you're all of a sudden going to be going down. And that's the real responsibility from my perspective of what a board and leadership team does together.
So it sounds like it's more than just, okay, we're going to sit around and, hey, did we pay this bill and did we accomplish this task? It's making sure that the CEO or the leader and their board are focusing on, hey, what's our mission? What's our vision? How are we executing that from a strategic standpoint? And what resources do we need to make sure that we accomplish it?
No, that's exactly right, Travis. And, the example I like to use is think about when John F. Kennedy gave that speech, in 10 years, we're going to place a man on the moon. Everybody at NASA knew his or her mission in fulfilling that, right? Or his or her role in fulfilling that mission. My perspective is every congregation, every nonprofit or for-profit company also has to have that clarity of mission. And I talk about the elevator speech, but it's more than an elevator speech. It's, I live in a 56-story building. I say you have to have that speech done by the 5th floor. So It's got to be right. And an example I like to use of how at the end of our time, we got it a little bit wrong, but now we got it right, is my own organization, Lutheran Social Services of the South. So our mission was to provide help, healing, and hope to the children, elderly, and the poor in the name of Jesus Christ. And it was a well-meaning mission. We were serving everybody, but the problem with that mission is that we almost always had to say yes because people would come to us and it fit our mission, right? We're going to help children, elderly, the poor, that's everybody. And so we didn't have the financial or, employee capacity to do that. So we got in a room for a number of days and said, what are we really good at? What can we really make the most difference and impact on? And we got to the point where everybody got excited and we realized that we had the potential to break the cycle of child abuse in Texas. And what having that clarity of mission did is it allowed us to not say no to a number of things. It allowed us to spin off retirement communities to other great providers. It allowed us to change our brand because we wanted to invite everybody to join us in our mission. It allowed us to create new education programs because education and social services go hand in hand with breaking the cycle of child abuse. And it allowed us to create an advocacy program and a research department. All of those came from having that clarity of mission. And 4 years after I left, I'm pleased to report that they're doing great.
That's great.
And my sense is that everybody needs to have that clarity in this day and age.
Yeah. So it helps you to be able to say yes to things. It helps you to say no to things so that you can stay on task. And instead of trying to be everything to everybody, it's being who can we be the best at? And I think that there's a lot of organizations that really need that clarity.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And, and the world's changing so fast, it's even hard to think 5 years out. You might have that nice tagline for 5 years out, but what I've been finding is that you really can only go about 3 years in, and you'll have 2 or 3 big goals you want to make. You may have to zig when you thought you were going to zag even for those 3-year goals. And then you want to have that one big 1-year goal because you want to keep that momentum going.
Right. Yeah, I think that the long vision, like the eagle-eyed vision of that 5 or 10 years, because the pace of change is happening so quickly anymore that I think it's got to be more like bat-like. It's like we can't really see that far ahead of us, and we're having to make changes on the fly because of what's right in front of us, as opposed to being able to see that long term.
Yes, no, absolutely. And, you saw this with every organization and company, but also especially maybe in congregations because, literally their parishioners could not come to their churches for the most part for a long period of time. And so it forced them into digital transformation. It forced them into serving their members in a different, unique way. And now that, COVID's in some ways over, at least we're managing it, the question becomes, what do we take the best of and incorporate into this new mission for this new normal for our new parishioners?
Yeah.
Because we're not going back to the old days.
Right. And even the culture has been shaped where even if we wanted to, the people that we're called to love and serve, both internally and externally, may not allow us to.
Yes. No, absolutely. And, interwoven in this with all organizations is that we're increasingly having to navigate through various different culture wars. And even, at the local level and another example of that would be at my old organization at Upbring, we provided services and still do provide services to undocumented minors along the borders. And we've been doing it through 4 presidential administrations. The laws and the rules really haven't changed from one administration to the other. We're truly caring for the least of these and staying out of the politics, right? Well, at one point during the Trump administration, the politics got so exciting or crazy that there were people on both sides saying, why are you doing this? Why are you supporting President Trump? And some are saying, why are you serving the people that are coming across the border, right? But what was really helpful for us at our board level was that we had board members that came from a Democrat perspective as well as a Republican perspective. And so we were able to understand both sides of the perspective.
Right.
And come to then the clarity of what our values taught us, which is we're staying out of politics, but we're going to continue to serve the least of these because that's what God has asked us to do.
Right. So that, again, having the right people around the table to give that larger perspective to navigate the challenges, as well as also take advantage of the opportunities is really crucial and important.
Absolutely. And that's what we found. And I was afraid if we only had one perspective or the other, we wouldn't have had that honest, trust-filled conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, sometimes I like to talk about, what are the elephants in the room? And every organization, every congregation has an elephant in the room. And it's because, over time, history, structural environment, it changes. And so you as an organization also have to evolve. But what I find is that oftentimes boards and leadership teams just simply don't want to bring up that elephant. And so it remains hidden. And, sometimes you might need a facilitator. Sometimes you can do it on your own. But it's really important to raise those elephants so you can wrestle with them in that trust-filled, blame-free environment.
Yeah, yeah. So, Kirk, as we may have some folks who are listening and watching this podcast, and they are leaders of organizations, or maybe they're a board member of an organization or a ministry, and they're recognizing, how we are organized is just not working for us. What advice would you give to them to begin this journey of evaluation and considering some changes?
Yeah. A couple of pieces. One is I would be intentional about this, because I think the tendency of some leadership teams and boards is we know it's not working, but we don't know what to do. So we're just going to muddle along. And I don't think that's the right answer.
That's the whole tread water thing.
Yes, exactly. And also knowing that you're not going to solve this in one board meeting. It may take a journey of a couple of years. It may be bringing in, intentionally recruiting and bringing in the right skill sets and the right people around the table. It may be understanding what the elephants in the room are. So it could be, for example, bylaws or articles that 20 years ago made sense, but they don't make sense today in terms of maybe how you select board members or et cetera. Or maybe taking a look at how is your board meeting structured? Are you looking back all the time? Are you just reviewing financial results, talking about what great programs, happened in the past? Or are you truly looking forward and being intentional about strategy and clarity of mission going forward? Those are just several pieces of the puzzle that I would put together. The other interesting thing, Travis, about what the research says is for organizations to be successful, it's really important to have individuals with emotional intelligence sitting around the table. And if you don't have that, a lot of the pieces of the puzzle just won't get put into place.
Right.
And so as you select board members, as you select members of your leadership team, really focus on what is their emotional intelligence, and are they going to be able to have the skill sets to herd cats, to have empathy, to truly listen, to create that trust and integrity within that room. That's as important as anything, which I think we're just as a organization consultants and leaders starting to realize.
Yeah. Well, and that's some of the work that I've done with the Clifton Strengths Assessment as a Gallup Strengths coach is, to be able to take a look at the 34 different talent themes across the 4 domains, executing, influencing, relationship building, strategic thinking. You need all of it. I mean, it's great having a bunch of idea and strategy people, but you're also a community. You got to have relationship buildings. Once you design something, you got to be able to influence, to act and think. You've got to be able to get people who can execute that vision and that strategy. And so sometimes it's nice to have a lot of people like us, but it's important to have a lot of diverse perspectives, different ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving, because you need all of those gifts to accomplish the mission together, that more than what you can do by yourself.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the last thing I would add to that list is, if you're a CEO or executive director or principal, and I know you have a million things on your plate, but it's important and vital to take the time to build relationships with your individual board members. Whether it's having a cup of coffee or having lunch or having group dinners together, because that's where you build the relationship so that when times get tough, you can have those difficult conversations and come up with a good solution.
Yeah, because if you don't have the relationship and the trust, it's very easy for it to go wrong very quickly and become very adversarial, as opposed to, hey, this is tough, but together we can accomplish this.
Yes, absolutely. And then boards may say, well, maybe we need to get rid of the executive director, or maybe we need to get rid of this person. And, it's usually not the answer. Sometimes it is, but usually not. It's let's wrestle with this together. And what's interesting to me is I saw a statistic the other day that 2/3 of all organizations, whether it's a church, a nonprofit, for-profit, will have some sort of public relations or other issue within the next 5 years. And so you're going to have things that come up no matter how good of organization or congregation you have. And that's when it really is important for boards and leadership teams to lean in and to wrestle this with together and collectively make a good decision.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, Kirk, so the purpose of having these everyday believer conversations is we want to be able to talk with folks like you who are Christ followers, and yet are living out their faith in their different callings of life. For Luther, he talked a lot about, that in the horizontal callings of life, that really it's all about loving and serving our neighbors in the different areas of responsibility that he's given us to, so whether in the church, which often we think of, but it's also to our families. It's in the workplace. It's in our community and society. How do you see God using you specifically in this role of the work you do with CEOs and boards to be the blessing that God intends through your calling and vocation?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And so, so here's the joke. The joke is my wife and I joke that I'm only good at 5 things. Fortunately, maybe leading an organization and working with leaders is one of them, but it's not a long list, Travis. But I always go back to Romans 12, where, if you've been given the skills of leadership, you have a responsibility to fulfill your calling by doing it diligently.
Right.
But as you mentioned, all of our callings are creative equally. And so I'm not going to be a good leader if I'm not a good parent, if I'm not a good husband, if I'm not a good member of my church and community. And so I really focus on who has God placed in my world today to effectively serve. And, in this particular chapter and journey in my life, it's other CEOs, it's other principals, it's other, pastors and their boards who I can hopefully teach them in various ways and serve as a mentor to allow their organizations to more effectively serve their community. That's where I feel God's calling me. And it's really important, I think, to prayerfully discern how God's using you at that particular point in your time. Right. And as I wrote this book, one of the things I didn't want to do is set a goal, say I want to sell 10,000 copies or, I want to have 5 clients or whatever. But at my team and I, what we did is we set a goal of saying we want to have an impact on 1,000 different organizations. And it's a little bit hard to measure, so we're not perfect at this. But, so then every day and every week we can say, all right, we've heard of 10 more organizations that are collectively using this book, or we've been called and asked to talk about this or volunteer about this. And I think we're up to about 480 now. And
that's great.
So, but from our perspective, that was the right way to approach it, because we didn't want to make this about us. We wanted to make this about the impact that we could have using our collective gifts.
That's great. That's great. And I like that, because I think what you said about organizations really comes true to us as individuals. We can't be all things to all people, but we can be who God has created and redeemed us to be. And just like that means for organizations, having that clarity of vision and that focus for your life allows you to say yes to the things you're really good at and to say no at the things you're not good at. Like for me, don't do plumbing in my house. I want to call a plumber because that's not my gifting. But there are other things I'm really good at, and God puts people before us daily that we're supposed to love and serve. And that's our calling that day.
No, absolutely. And when you and I turn 80, God willing, our calling is going to be a lot different than it is today, but it's not any less important. It's just going to be different. And
Exactly. Great. Hey, Kirk, so people listening and viewing, again, leaders, board members, if they want to reach out to you, how could they get a hold of you?
Yeah, no, a lot of different ways. So they could go to kurtsenske.com. KurtSenske.com. Also kurtsenske@gmail.com. And I would love to have conversations if people are interested in learning more. We're at the point in our journey now where we have lots of just what I would call free conversations, because our goal in our ministry is to help people. And then it can also be, longer, more transformational, more episodic as well. But we're here to serve. And so if people have a governance or organizational question, I'd love to have that conversation.
And if they want to get a hold of your book, where can they get that at?
2 different ways. Probably the easiest is Amazon.com or cph.org, which is my publisher. Either of those, and they can also get a link through kurtsenske.com.
Wonderful. Hey, Kirk, thank you so much for joining us for this Everyday Believer conversation for the Called2B podcast. And we just want to wish you God's richest blessings to you and your partners on this mission of serving CEOs and boards so they can be more effective in their mission that God has called them to. So thank you, and just want to wish you God's blessings on your effort.
Likewise, Travis, appreciate the opportunity to share the gospel.
Sounds great. And we want to thank all of you, our listening and viewing audience, for joining us. We hope that you were blessed. If you are a leader, if you're a pastor, if you are a board member and you're wanting to be more effective in your mission, I encourage you to reach out to Kirk, pick up his book. And I think there's some really wonderful thoughts within that to help you figure out, hey, what's our best governance model? Do we have the right people around the board? How do we focus on the important things of mission and vision and evaluating that? Because we live in turbulent times. There are adaptive challenges all over. And these are some fantastic resources to help you, your board, and your organization and ministry to be more effective. We want to thank Malem and the Southeastern District for their generous support that made this podcast possible. And with that, we want to wish you all God's richest blessings. And we'll catch you next time for the Called2B podcast. Take care, everybody.